Anger is like that warning light on your dashboard of the car, right? It's just saying there's something that is going on. I mean, we all have had cars, right, that we've driven way too long with that check engine light on, but it's not something that you can just cover over and say there's nothing there. Anger is that warning to say something's going on deeper, and we need to understand what's driving this expression or feeling of anger, and what do I do with it. We really would benefit from a bit of a reframing of anger to see it not as a negative emotion, but just as an emotion. Period.
Yeah.
The end. And it's okay to have it. Now, I mean, we'll talk further here, but I mean, what we do with that and how we allow it to either control us, or are we in control of it, and how do we express it is a different matter.
Welcome to this episode of the Modern Day Missionaries podcast. Today we're talking about anger. Anger on the mission field, missionaries who get angry, and all the different ways that we get angry, whether you are one who is obviously and outwardly angry, or whether you are one who is secretly angry, or whether you think you're never angry at all. We talk about all of it today with Erik Troyer from Vallejo. Erik is a counselor with Vallejo, and over their counselors as they go out and meet with missionaries on the field. And it's an excellent organization. Erik himself was a missionary with his family for many years while raising his kids. And so he brings the experience of having been a missionary and then being a counselor who works with missionaries and sees all the different ways in which we experience all of these emotions. So today is going to be profoundly deep as we talk about what are some of the things that bring up anger in us and how we can manage and experience anger in a healthy way. So with that, we're going to dive into today's episode with Erik Troyer. Hey, Erik, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Oh, absolutely. Glad to be here.
Oh, yeah. It's so good to be with you. I was just talking to Danny, thinking about when we were with you in Caroline down in Thailand last year and at the retreat for missionaries, and you came and were providing counseling, and it was such a fun time and so impacting for all the missionaries who were there.
Yeah, I agree. Those sort of settings, I mean, there's just kind of irreplaceable impact that happens in those settings when they're able to get away and process in a environment that's completely removed from what they're going through. Some good things happen.
That's the truth. Well, and we got to know you guys and just loved your energy, your spirit, the way that you care for people. And so I knew the first time I met you, I wanted to have you on. And when I was thinking about topics, the one that came to mind was anger, which, can sound funny. Like, why are we talking about anger? That sounds random. But I mean, for any missionary who's listening, missionaries, we get angry. And some of you are like, I don't get angry. Well, you just are suppressing your anger. I know. I was one of those. Even you sweet ones. I mean, there's no way for you to live in a cross-cultural setting to make the kind of changes and adjustments that you have in life and not feel some variation on anger. So I kind of just would love to even begin unpacking that a little bit with you, Erik. What are some of the different ways people express or suppress anger, and where's that coming from in missionary spaces?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm glad that of all the people that that when you thought about anger and rage, I was the first person that came to mind. So thank you for that. Anyway, I'm not sure, but
I know what have you on. Okay.
No,
I set myself up for that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you asked that question. So, being in the missions world, my whole adult life, basically, those outside will often ask me, like, what's unique about serving missionaries, or tell me what are the major things that missionaries struggle with. And, in some regard, in a lot of regards, actually, we're just people. I mean, everybody deals with anger and the whole array of emotions that come with just life. And so I think that would be my preface to answering that question is, well, why do missionaries struggle with anger? Because they're people and they're human, and I mean, they're just like everybody else. It's I would say the special circumstances and surroundings and environment and issues that they have to deal with have some exacerbating and complicating factors, which might increase anger. But the fact that they struggle with it, I mean, is quite normal.
So, first of all, I love that you brought up just the normality of it, or normalcy
Mhm.
of, like, anger is real. We're humans. We struggle with it and we experience it. Maybe talk about anger as an emotion. Sometimes we label it so negatively.
Yeah,
How is it? What's a healthy way to view anger?
that's a great question. And, uh, I think we have to look at it as an okay experience to have, as opposed to something that is to be avoided or discounted or minimized or you know most of us, and having worked with many a person, I would say most don't come from family models where healthy expression and embracing of anger as just a normative experience in life is okay. Usually, it's a bad thing that we need to not have part of our life, um, or it's such an accepted and over the top experience that people don't know quite how to deal with it because it's so volatile and impactful. But I would say, yeah, anger is always like, I liken it to like that warning light on your dashboard of the car, right? It's just saying, hey, there's something that is going on, and it doesn't mean that it's. I mean, if you put, I mean, we all have had cars, right, that we've driven way too long with that check engine light on, but it's not something that you can just cover over and say there's nothing there. Anger is kind of that warning to say something's going on deeper, and we need to understand what's driving this expression or feeling of anger, and what do I do with it? And so I think it's we really would benefit from a bit of a reframing of anger to see it not as a negative emotion, but just as an emotion. Period.
Yeah.
The end. And it's okay to have it. Now, I mean, we'll talk further here, but I mean, what we do with that and how we allow it to either control us, or are we in control of it, and how do we express it, and how does it go from that point is a different matter, maybe. But the fact that we have anger, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just part of our existence, and so I
Mm.
think that's kind of the first, yeah, thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. Okay. So anger is neutral, but the expression of anger is not. And so even I'm thinking about the different ways that I've felt and experienced anger. I mean, we've got the biblical righteous anger, where
Sure.
we see Jesus overturning the tables, where we see God righteously angry. And the beauty of that, and as a missionary, if I'm experiencing righteous anger and that propels me to do something to save someone, to help someone, there's a beauty in that. Like, I'm glad God gets angry on my behalf and wants
Amen.
to do something to protect and save me.
Amen.
Thank God
Yes.
for
Yes.
the anger that protects. And then there's the anger that is aggressive, that's scary, that hurts others. Then there's the anger that's passive aggressive, that hurts others in a different kind of way. It just kind of
Sure.
sneaks out there
Yeah.
on the side. And there's self-directed anger. I'd love for you to kind of share about maybe I'm missing some. There's more you could add. The different kinds of anger that a missionary might experience.
Yeah. So I think, when we talk about righteous anger, it is a little bit difficult for us, right? Because I mean, when we compare ourselves to God's understanding, and like we're just never going to be able to see, understand, and handle that emotion in the same way. So yes, Paul encourages us to be angry but do not sin, but so
Mm-hmm.
often we do sin when we're angry. We just have less ability to cope with it. But yeah, I mean, that righteous anger, there is so much that this side of glory is broken. And when you're in the world, you see that in some pretty sad in real ways. And for a missionary to see that on a regular basis, that leads to deep levels of wounding and impact, and just the
Mhm.
injustice, the hurt,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
the ugliness that this world, the people that you have gone to live amongst and serve, they are being oppressed, they're being taken advantage of, they're being abused, they're being hurt, they're being stolen from, they're being lied to and manipulated. Like, I mean, all these things that are just so unjust in this world, and your heart pours out for these people. And so there is an anger, there is a, Lord, this is not right. This is not your will in this world. And indeed it's not. I mean, but again, we live on this side of full redemption and full glory. Um, and so I think that um, is one thing that, we can be glad that we can resonate with the heart of God. So maybe one point on that I think is important is, instead of saying I ought not feel this way, we need to go to God and say, how can I partner with you, not in revenge, right? For
Yeah.
vengeance is his, but how can I partner with you at a heart level over the injustice, over the brokenness, over the hurt and the pain? Um, and so anger in that context, and taken from that vantage point, really can be a blessing, because it builds intimacy and connection and depth and alignment with God's heart. And so, anger can be something that is used for some real good in our lives.
Mm.
Um, and, if we can just be honest, I mean, you look at just the Psalms. I mean, there's a lot in other portions of Scripture,
Oh,
but
yeah.
you just look at the Psalms. I mean, full of, um, I would say, not just communicating frustration and slight anger, but absolute rage and just pouring out before the Lord. And I mean, that is where He wants us, is to be in that level of intimate relation with Him, where we can pour out our heart's cry, our heart's roar at times before
Mm-hmm.
Him. Um, yeah. So I mean, that's the positive side of anger. That righteous anger. But I mean, obviously, we experience a lot of other aspects of anger too, and that comes from ourselves feeling devalued or minimized or rejected, or um, not heard, or not loved. I mean, there's lots of other things that can kind of
Betrayed,
betrayed.
spiritual
Absolutely,
abuse. I mean,
yeah,
the list goes on and on. All the
for
things that can
sure,
happen to make us feel angry. Yeah. My
for
gosh. I mean, I
sure.
remember going on the field, or I remember we ran a missionary internship for young adults for a lot of years. And you would just kind of watch them go through all the emotions when they came down. And in the beginning, of course, it's honeymoon, but they would get to the point where they started to feel angry and sad and crying and all the feels. But the anger piece is so real, especially when there's a clash of cultural values. Like,
Yeah,
this is how things should be. And not because you think your culture is better, but because it's what you're used to and it's what you were taught. And then you come in encounter with a value that's completely opposing to what you grew up with. And you're like, what? This
yeah,
is inappropriate. This is
yeah,
wrong. And
yes.
I mean, oh, God, even stuff like, I mean, what missionary has not had trouble getting a visa
Mm-mm.
or being
Yeah,
asked for a bribe? I mean, you feel righteously angry at that point. Like, how dare they ask me for a bribe?
yeah,
And then you realize how the government works. Not that it's right, but that's just how it works.
yeah,
To
yeah,
everything like what you mentioned, to seeing somebody get hurt, to seeing your kids um, mistreated, to being betrayed by somebody in your church or a leader, or somebody on your support team saying something rude. I mean, there's 1,000
yes,
things, and we're just more raw sometimes. I don't want to say we're more raw than other human beings, but sometimes there's
yeah.
points in life where we are.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think there's some contributing factors to that. There are more variables at play. I mean, having experienced
Yes.
life cross culturally and life in the States, there's just a lot more that you contend with on a regular basis. There's a lot
Yeah.
more out of your control stress points. And and then you combine that with the fact that you're not just uh, you don't just have colleagues, but you have that kind of intertwinedness of life in a very different way that leads to different levels of stress, oftentimes within a
Mhm.
team. And then the socioeconomic, the political, the environmental, the visa issue. Yeah, and so I do believe that the weight of uh, the cross cultural workers' lifestyle and setting, it does compound and just bring about a next level order of things that can lead to anger for
Mhm.
sure.
And we're talking about it today because it is an emotion that has a great potential to do a lot of harm. We can say that all emotions are neutral, but not all emotions are the same in terms of their potential impact. And deep, deep anger can do deep, deep damage to ourselves and those around us. And for missionaries, you can just feel like, who do I talk to about my anger? I mean, if I've got a problem with patience, sure, I can call my team back home or somebody from member care or whatever and be like, I'm struggling with a lack of patience. And everyone's like, ah, me too. Isn't that funny? And it's, it's a big joke. But
Yeah,
what
yeah,
happens when you confide in somebody and say, man, I'm struggling with anger? Everyone's like, okay,
right.
scary person. Like what? So it's not something that is really comfortable to talk to about other people because we don't know what their reaction is going to be like. So then we are left with our anger, whether it's coming out straight and hurting people like a fire hose, or it's like a secret poison just eating away at people bit by bit through
Mm,
withdrawing or side comments. People
yeah.
are left without the tools to know what to do with this. So I would just ask you, like as a counselor, Erik, what would you do if somebody felt safe enough to come to you? Because you're a Vallejo, you're a
Sure.
neutral party. And so you don't, nobody from their organization is going to find out they're meeting with you. So when someone comes to you and says, Erik, I am struggling with anger, what are some of the places that you take them to or ways you're able to help them?
I would say, yeah, yeah. I mean, that is my profession and my place of work, and I do obviously very much value and believe that a counseling relationship can be a very safe and healthy place to process these sort of things. But it's not the only place, right? And so, I would frame what people need as support, like true, genuine support, and that may be a counselor. It might be somebody from your home fellowship. It might be a dear friend. It might be a family member. Might be somebody in your organization. But everybody, I believe, absolutely needs those safe people in their life to be able to share like what's really going on. Because if we contain it inside, generally speaking, it only leads to more anger and more frustration, and then it can lead down that road of bitterness and resentment, which begins to just rot us from the inside, and it becomes much more insidious than just the pure emotion of anger. Um, and so yeah, so but in a counseling setting, if somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I'm really struggling with anger," I mean, my first uh, goal is to allow them to have that freedom to put it all out there without any judgment, without any criticism, or need to fix it. So the illustration
Mm.
I use regularly with folks is, let's just pretend there's a table in front of us and we have some 3x5 cards, and you're just putting these things out on the table on 3x5 cards, and we're not going to do anything with them right now. We're just putting them out there, and nobody else is going to see these but you and I. And so just whatever illustration is used, but uh, to say, if you don't acknowledge it yourself, and at least put it out there to another human being, chances are it's going to fester at some level and turn into
Mm-hmm.
something much worse than what you're experiencing right now. Um, so you know, I think curiosity actually is a skill that we don't really employ all that much. You know, like we were talking about before, anger, bad, kill it, minimize it, reject it, cover over it, whatever. But what if, you had that phrase, curiosity killed the cat. So obviously it wasn't good for the cat. I would argue it's really good for humans, for us to be curious. So what if we look at these 3x5 cards with all this, negative emotion on them, and we just get curious about it? Like, what's that about? What's leading that?
Mm.
And, when did that start? What might be contributing to you feeling that? And so that's why I try and walk with people, just to get a little bit curious about it, as opposed to making a value judgment on it, because we can't really see it for what it is until we get a little more objective in our framework, and start looking at it and just asking some questions, and that helps people dig a little bit deeper, to some of the driving causes for that. And until you find that, until you understand that, it's not going to remediate. You can't do anything about it. You can't work
Mm-hmm.
towards resolution or healing or repair, or making headway on these things, until you understand that. So I think that's
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 good.
kind of the first order.
I like that because it's a switch from like the why are you angry to what are some things you're angry about. And that is a more curious approach, because if we're coming in like why am I angry and why, it's just very it feels, it puts you on the defensive. It makes you feel like there's something wrong with you. But when you, like you said, just even kind of switch that question and get curious and let's just talk about that, it all of a sudden becomes safe. So what I'm hearing you say is whether it's in a counseling relationship or somewhere else, it's finding somebody where it's safe to talk about the things that you feel angry about, where they're not going to enter into judgment, because that's going to close you down. And
Yeah.
curiosity is a key. You referenced this a little bit earlier, but there's something usually underneath anger. I've heard it said that anger is often a secondary emotion.
Hmm.
And there's usually something underneath. And so often it's fear.
Yeah. We all uh, want to know. We want to be secure. We have this craving to know what's coming, know what's behind, know what's coming at us. And we want to be able to control our environment and understand,
Mm-hmm.
are we safe? And especially in the missionary lifestyle, there are just so many things that are out of your control. There's
Yeah.
so many things that you don't have any capacity to affect. And so it does increase that level of fear and anxiety. And yeah, that can lead to significant amounts of anger, because you
Yeah.
just don't know how to process that. And I would say, yeah, now if I think of maybe just a few areas where it is most difficult for a missionary to communicate. Um, so maybe a more nominal, more acceptable one would be driving. Oh, the driving here just drives me crazy, and
Yeah.
man, it just makes me so angry. And everybody's like, "Yeah, me too." And, blah, blah, blah. And you can more easily
Uh-huh.
talk about things like that, or the heat here,
Totally.
or whatever.
The
The
government, the visas,
right,
the
right, those
yeah.
things. But um, I- you know, I think about one's relationship with the Lord is one that you may have, periods where there's some anger, and you don't
Mhm.
communicate it to the Lord, you don't communicate it to others, it just stays inside. I think of marriage. That's often a place where, I mean, a lot more frequently, people are more apt to communicate, I'm angry with my children or my extended family, but but not always a marriage. And so that's one where it's harder to find that right person to be able to communicate, like, where am I really
Yes.
at and what's going on, with inside. And then I think for some, local relationships, with the people group that you're connected to, because you've given up your whole life to move there, and that's what you're all about. Like, I can't say that I'm mad at them, or I'm mad at um, certain elements of the culture. And so anyways, there are some areas where it's just more difficult, and it's you got to find that right person that's able
Yeah.
to enter into that conversation in a safe way. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I've heard it said that anger is a response to a perceived injustice.
Mm.
And so, two questions I ask myself when I feel angry on a regular basis is, where is the perceived injustice here? And what am I afraid of? And I mean, I can use that even in a very simple thing. Like, let's just say I'm in the morning having my Bible time with Jesus, and my sweet little daughter walks in and she's feeling anxious. So she's asking me questions about her day and who she's going to see and who's going to pick her up later and all the things. And I can begin to feel a little bit of a simmering anger. We don't like to say
Mm.
anger, so we say
Sure.
irritation. There's
Sure. Yeah.
softer ways of saying anger words. I feel a little frustrated,
Yeah.
but that's just a spin on anger. So when I feel that, I think, what is the perceived injustice? Because, like, what is the perceived injustice? Well, I feel like my time is being taken away from me. I want this time with Jesus, and I feel like she's taking something from
Sure.
me, which sounds awful, but I'm just being very vulnerable right now. That's what I
Yeah.
feel in that
Yeah.
moment. And then what is the fear? I mean, you just said it right now, a loss of control, a loss of being able to do what I want to do, what I feel I need to do. And it's funny how just making those things logical all of a sudden takes a little bit of the fizz out of the soda of anger that I feel. I'm
Mm.
like, oh, that's what's going on here. And then I can go, okay, so I feel she's taking something away. Now I can remind myself I serve an interruptible God. So I can be an interruptible person.
Amen.
It
Yeah.
is a godly thing to be interrupted in my Bible time and respond well to her. So I'm actually working with Jesus right now. So I can correct my thinking. Doesn't mean it won't make it go away totally, but I can
Sure.
correct my thinking enough to just bring that fizz down a little bit. And
Yeah.
then remind myself I don't need to be afraid. God's not judging me because I'm not going to have as many minutes in my Bible time because I've given some to her, and
Mm.
He'll open up other opportunities for me. So I don't know, those two particular questions have been helpful to me. Would you have anything else that you would add when someone finds themselves uh, angry? What could be some steps they could take or questions they could ask to get their thinking in a healthy place?
Yeah. And as you were talking, the word expectation came to mind, because so often it's what do uh, what I expect out of this situation, out of this environment, out of this team, out of this mission experience, out of my ministry. I mean, we all have expectations about a lot of things, and sometimes we hold so fast to those expectations that when they are disrupted, um, boy, do we get rattled on the inside. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, obviously, anger is one of those expressions that comes out. Um, but yeah, so I think that's something to keep in mind. Like, if we can
Mm-hmm.
take a more amendable, adaptable approach to life. And I know that this heavily leans into personality styles. Some people are much more rigid and less adaptable than others. And so I mean, there's that. But personality is just personality. It is not a life sentence that you can only be that way. Like, we can adapt and flex from our default personality. And
Mm-hmm.
so, just when we do recognize that, yeah, this is not meeting my expectations, or I thought it was going to be like this, and it is way over here in left field. Um, like, what do I do with that? And how do I process that? Who do I process that with? And do I need to adjust my expectations or my assumptions about this? And can I be okay with that? Um, and that's, I mean, they say the one constant is change, right? And it's
Yeah.
true. Like, life is a constant change. It's how we go about that change, and how
Mm.
flexible and amendable we are through that process. I think that is key. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love that you did reference personality there for a second. Like you said, it's not an excuse,
Yeah.
but it is helpful to understand, what is my default angry response? Am I somebody who is volatile, where I respond in an assertive or aggressive way? That's my natural default. Or maybe it's not even aggressive. It's just like I respond a little bit more quickly, a little bit more assertively?
Mm.
Or am I somebody who stuffs things,
Mm.
who's like, I'm not angry, I'm fine? Or somebody who's letting it slip out sideways? I mean, what do you do? And also that can change with different people. Sometimes with
Sure.
certain people, we're comfortable being assertive. Maybe I'm comfortable being assertive with my spouse, but
Yeah.
I'm not when I'm with leadership. I mean, then
Right.
I'm just very like, oh, everything is okay and everything's just fine, because that's not always the correct response, as you were saying. I mean, like for me, I will own I was more on the passive aggressive, even less than that. Like on the, I don't experience angry. I am not angry. I don't get angry. I
Mhm.
am happy. I am nice. I am friendly. I am peaceful. I am easy. I owned those as
Yeah.
being part of me. So I remember when I did a personality test and they told me I was in this gut triad, otherwise known as the anger triad. I was like, stop. That's ridiculous.
That made you
I'm
angry.
not angry. Yes, it did. You're right. Like, I'm not angry. And then when I started reading about it, I was like, oh, I mean, it honestly kind of scared me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I do
Mm.
get angry all the time. I just, I'll stuff it down or whatever, or I'll tell myself I'm not angry, or I'll make excuses for somebody else. And that's just kind of slowly accumulating inside of me until one day it bursts out. But
Sure. Yeah.
so I had to really work on developing that assertive side of things, standing up for myself, standing up for others. So for our listeners, what is your default, conflict style? Is it one that's like people pleasing, like, oh, I need to like always make people, other people not upset with me because I don't want to be upset? I mean, am I leaning towards people, moving towards them? Am I moving away from people, running away and hiding and pretending I'm not angry? Or am I like confronting and being assertive with people? And when we
Yeah.
know what our default is, it's not to judge ourselves for it, because sometimes that's an appropriate
Mm.
response. It's good to sometimes be assertive and sometimes leave the room and sometimes,
Yeah.
do other things. But
Yeah.
it's not always good in each situation. So what do we need to grow in? Do I need to grow on becoming more assertive? Do I need to grow on like closing my mouth and walking away? Do I need to grow in being kinder to other people and moving towards them, to making this environment a better place for both of us to have these conversations?
I think two words come to my mind, to boil it down: grace and truth. And I see in the missions world, uh, maybe even the larger world of Christendom, but specifically in the missions world, grace is very readily extended, and we lean heavy and hard on grace towards one another. But truth, uh, not so much. Kind of back to your anxiety and fear element. Um, if we share truthfully how we're feeling, or how somebody hurt us, or how this relationship is being experienced by you, if we really share that, what does that mean? How are they gonna look at me? And, are they gonna be mad? And is this gonna disrupt, uh, what we're doing, or how we're doing it, and all of those things. So I would say maybe a better balance, or application of that truth component is much needed in the missions community. Like, I see the value, I preach the value, I try and live the value, but to get back to the raw honesty, I don't always want the value. I
Yeah.
want to just avoid and let it be. But
Mm-hmm.
to lean into the and say, no, I am called to live in grace, yes, with those around me, but also in truth. And part of that truth is entering into things that are difficult, conversations,
Mm.
and things that, I don't know how they're going to end, or I don't know what the end result is going to be. Um,
Yeah.
but but it's right and it's good, and I need to. Now, I think on the other side of that equation, for those who are maybe more inclined towards, up in your face all the time with everything, I think, for them, maybe the encouragement is just the opposite. Okay, maybe I
Mm-hmm.
don't need to be as, um, immediately, leading out with truth, in hard and maybe finger pointing fashion. Maybe I do need to have a little bit more graciousness in my approach in this relationship, or how I share these things. Not that you shouldn't share them, but like how I share them, and in what setting do I share them,
Yeah.
and the frequency of sharing them, So, yeah.
That's a great way of summing it up. Do I tend to
Mm.
lead with grace or truth? And which one could I afford to mix a little bit more in?
Yeah. Yeah. Because we
Yeah,
all tend to be skewed towards one or the other.
we do.
So yeah, just knowing that, yeah, we're called to live out well both of those in relationship. So, um, but yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, and I see, on a personal level, but also on a maybe a little bit more macro level in teams. I over the years have done a lot of team conflict mediation cases, and I do so because I really find value um, in people resolving um, some of these pain points. Some of these areas of what they perceive as irreconcilable differences,
Hmm.
um, and oftentimes it is just a matter of not understanding where the other person's coming from and some of those driving forces and factors, and not sharing honestly and authentically, like what's really behind the scenes here. And it's
Yeah.
very interesting when once you allow people to see one another as the person that they are, and what's driving some of these fears and anxieties and hurts, the the kind of disillusion or dissolving of some of those friction points can begin
Hmm.
to take place.
I'm glad you brought up teams because that's a space where a lot of frustration and anger can
Um,
occur.
for sure.
And we're talking to a lot of leaders who listen to this. And if you're a leader, you have to be able to hold space for team members to feel anger. And so, what does that look like if you are a leader who doesn't have a high tolerance for anger? It scares you, or it feels like a threat to your
Yeah.
leadership,
Yeah.
or it's disloyalty. I mean, I've heard all those things said. And yet, if we're going to be good leaders, we have to be able to create spaces, certainly to
Hmm.
show members how to appropriately express anger. That doesn't mean if I'm a great leader, I'm going to let you scream at me and be like, that's
Sure.
cool, no problem. I mean, I can teach you how you can be angry and be appropriate and be respectful, but I got to be able to hold that because I see way too many
Mm,
leaders. I have seen way too many that equate anger with disloyalty or
yes.
disrespect when
Yes.
it absolutely was none of those things. And, so as a leader, if that threatens you somehow or makes you uncomfortable, it's saying, Lord, how can you help me enlarge my capacity to receive somebody else's anger or frustration
Mm,
and be able to
yeah.
hear what they're saying behind that anger?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Erik.
Well, I think that kind of the precursor to that, how do I handle somebody else's, is how do I handle my own? As a
Mm,
leader, I mean, you're bearing um, again a next level of issues on your shoulder, and so it's, am I in a spot where I am dealing with my own internal world in healthy ways, to where I can absorb, take on, and help others through their own. Because if
mhm.
we're in a place of frazzled, frayed, and just completely disoriented space emotionally, and we're about to lose it every day, and it's just up to here, you're
Yeah,
probably not going to be able to take on much from somebody else, and
that's
nor
true.
should they be expected to. Honestly, I mean, we all have our
Mhm.
limits, and we do have to deal with our stuff. So I think that's
Yeah.
that's kind of the precursor question is, as a leader, how am I dealing with my own realities that I
Yes.
wrestle with, both maybe personal life or work life or team life. Um, and then, if that is in a place where, okay, now I do have capacity, I think the question is, now how do I allow somebody else to come in, share,
Mm.
unpack, and then I can take that on. um,
Yeah.
so yeah, right. I mean, we need to treat leaders with respect and uh, human dignity. Now, that gets lost sometimes in the most close relationships. And I don't know why that is, but you think of a marriage and like husband and wife bickering and fighting one another and assuming that the other's heard or spoken. I don't know. We just we don't treat one another with like we would never treat another friend like that. Why would we treat our spouse like that? And I think the same applies sometimes on teams. Like we wouldn't treat a supporter like that. We wouldn't treat a national like that. We wouldn't treat somebody from a different org like that. But we treat our team like that. Come on, I mean, they're
Yes.
respectful, honorable people. Let's treat them with dignity, and invite them into conversation as opposed to attacking. Let's assume uh, the best and have that they have genuine, true, good intentions driving their decisions rather than accusatory, condemning, and
Yeah.
assuming that they're got it out for me. And so just yeah, it's never right for people to come in and attack, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think a leader, it's a skill set more than a personality, but the skill set is
Mm.
how do I diffuse the current elevated anger? How do I invite them into conversation? And how do I let them know that I do care deeply about them and I want them to feel free to communicate, but it's got to be done in a way that's not attacking, you know? Because I mean,
Yes.
none of us want to be controlled and none of us want to be attacked, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so we all want to be treated with respect and honor, um, as we should, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, a leader
Yeah.
needs to have that skill set to be able to kind of welcome in uh, the heightened emotion that might not have the proper constraints on it,
Yeah.
and diffuse that in a way that allows for healthy conversation to take place. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So as I'm listening to you, Eric, I'm thinking if somebody's going to talk to leadership and they're angry about something, they're looking for two things that this is coming up for me. They're looking for two things for empathy and for action.
Mm,
So I want to be
yeah.
listened to, understood, heard, empathized with, and I want action to be taken. Something's wrong. There's a perceived injustice, and I want something to happen. And I think if we have a leader who only offers empathy and acts like, oh, yeah, I understand totally,
Correct.
but nothing ever changes, that's just going to make somebody more angry.
Yeah.
And then I think if we have a leader who shows no empathy and just has some type of action or reaction, it's like, first of all, without empathy, they're not going to take the right action.
That's
If,
right.
if you're not understanding your person, who's coming to you, the action is not going to be the action that person's looking for. It might be more of a reaction. So I think both are the case. And so as a leader, again, kind of asking myself, what is my default? Do I tend to empathize more or do I tend to react or take some type of action? How can I be a leader who listens and takes action? And the action is not always what the person wants. So I want to be
Yeah.
careful to say that too.
Yeah.
As a leader, my job is to not listen to everyone who's angry and do everything they want me to do.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they're going to want me to do things that are totally not appropriate or don't work or they're
Hmm.
missing insider information that I don't have. But still, some type of action is appropriate, even if it's explaining to that person or it's asking them, to trust you and saying, I do hear you. There are things I cannot explain to you that are going on. But there is some type of empathizing and action that's happening. I think there is also this myth that only reactive or outwardly angry leaders hurt people. And I just want
Mm-hmm.
to say again, and I
Yeah.
know you've seen
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
I have talked to
Yeah.
countless people who have been every bit as hurt
Sure.
by a leader who is outwardly peaceful and kind because they didn't take action.
Yeah.
And something was being done that was inappropriate. It was brought to the leader. Maybe that leader didn't protect them from somebody who was abusing them. Maybe
Yes.
that leader did not stand up for them at a time when it was totally appropriate. Maybe there was a weird conflict and the leader didn't want to choose sides. So they just kind of brushed it away and left this thing in place. So as a leader, you don't get a pass if you are more passive by nature and kind and sweet. And I say that as somebody who's wired that way. So I feel like I can say it. Guys, if
Sure.
you're wired like me and Eric, We don't have a pass. Just because we are sweeter on the outside does not mean we can do every bit as much damage
Mm-hmm.
as somebody who is
Absolutely.
abrasive and yelling. So I love that this is coming up from a leadership perspective, in how do we deal with our own anger, and how do we deal with the anger of others, and not just deal with. Deal with sounds like
Yeah,
there's not
yeah.
much we can do.
Problem. Yeah, yeah.
If you could just sit with a missionary leader right now who is like, and I don't care if they're outwardly angry, if they have this hidden anger that everybody knows about, but they think nobody really does, whatever
Mm.
type of anger they're dealing with, what would be a suggested next step you would give to somebody who's like, I got to do something?
True and genuine first approach is you go to the Lord with it.
Mm,
Like that is the safest place that we have in this world.
yes.
We don't know how others will handle what's on the inside, right? And so that's what keeps us from doing that a lot of times is, will they love me? Will they care for me? Will they think bad of me? Whatever the question is, we don't know, but we do know our loving Father, and we do know our Savior who uh, uh, bore everything for us and wants to journey with us and has called us his and part of his family. And so we can enter into that. So that's first order. Like you've got to admit it to the Lord for first before you enter into it with another person. Now,
Yeah.
he has built us for community, and we do need to do that with others also. Um, I would say, maybe doing a little bit of a self check prior to doing it with others. What is my purpose in doing this? Because, it could be I just need to vent and puke out my emotion somewhere. But what's the goal? Like what's the driving force for that? I mean, that feels good. It's cathartic and it's a good purge of emotions. But what do I really want out of this? Do I
Mm,
want to understand? Do I want healing? Do I want compassion? Do I want God to do a work in me through what I'm experiencing? And if that's the driving force, then you can maybe more fruitfully have those conversations with others because I can pray. I can come to you, Stephanie, and say, "Hey, Stephanie, look, you're my friend. I'm going through something right now. I don't know what to make of it, and I'm about to lose my mind, and nobody knows. And I haven't shared this with anybody, um, but I don't want this. I don't want this part of my life tearing me up like this. Is there a time when we can get together where I could share some of this with you and just unpack it, and you could help me like gain some perspective that I can't have by myself?" Like that gives you the clue in like he's inviting me in to that inner private world because he wants something different than what he's experiencing right now. So whatever that safe person is, just I think going in with an intentionality of why am I doing this? Do I just need, a friend that's just gonna take it all and agree with me and say, yeah, you're right and they're wrong, or this is bad and I'm on your side. Well, I mean, that always feels good, but it doesn't really lead to much growth or development or change, and have kind of a goal of what you want to engage with that person for.
he loves you, and he can take however big of emotions you've got. He's got you. He's got you. So
Can I add just one more component to this
please
discussion?
do.
So uh, I think there's another side to when we blow it. Okay, and I didn't want to end without talking about this because um, we don't always do it right. I mean, we've been talking about how to do it in healthy ways and what's a proper right and approach to deal with our anger. But the reality is we're going to mess up and we're going to hurt
Yeah.
others and we're going to blow it one way or another relationally. So I think just a real key point to keep in mind is that too is an opportunity for growth. right? And far too often we're really good at having that lash in our hands and just whipping ourselves on the back. So we feel bad because of our thoughts or our feelings or our anger. And then I didn't do it right, or I blew up at this person, or I attacked them, or I stuffed it and I didn't enter into it. Anyways, we take that lash and we just further beat up ourselves, And so just put that thing aside, just burn it, get away with that thing, and say, you know what, even in the times where I don't do it right, how can that be leveraged for my growth, for the growth of this relationship, and for circling back around? I think especially in, we haven't really talked about this, but especially in the realm of parenting, this
Mm.
oftentimes comes up. You know, um, it's funny. My wife and I would talk about, we didn't know how selfish we were until we got married, and then we didn't know how angry we could get until we had kids, right? And talk about your life being disrupted,
Yeah.
um, but you just don't do everything right, and so um, as a parent, yes, we want to train our children and educate them and teach them in the right ways, but they're human too, and they're going to experience anger. They're going to experience times where they don't do it right.
Hmm.
So, what happens when you don't? Do you come back around and say, "Hey, I need to ask for your forgiveness for how I handled that"?
Yeah.
Um, and can I have another go at that? Because I really want us to do us in a great, healthy way, and I want to make this right. And so that might be in a parenting, that might be in a team context, that might be in a marriage context, or just a friend context, but it doesn't matter. Come back around and say, I mean, that's what forgiveness is for. We all need it. We all need forgiveness daily. Let's extend that to other people. Let's ask that from other people, and let's re-enter back into it. So, anger it's like fire, right? In one regard. So yeah, we can normalize it and say that it's just an emotion like anything else. But um, wind and fire are very different in terms of their elements, but they're very
Yes.
different in terms of destructive impact. I mean, it
Hmm.
just takes a little bit of fire, and boy, can you get burned. Where you can take a lot of wind before it has destructive impact.
Yes.
And so anger is kind of like that. That yes, it is normative, but at the same time, boy, it can burn us and it can burn others if not handled
Hmm.
and dealt with appropriately. So in those times where it does burn, where it does affect, ask for forgiveness, extend forgiveness, and circle back around and let it be part of that redemptive process in your life. And may it be used for good.
What a great note to end on, Erik. Thank you. We're just so thankful for all of you again who just listened today, who are being vulnerable and open with yourself right now, wanting to take a look at, hey, where is this coming from? What am I dealing with? And Lord, how can you bring some healing to me in this area? How can I experience anger in a way that's God honoring and that's healthy, and be honest with myself, but not use it to hurt others or to hurt myself? So, um, Erik, thank you for speaking into that today. And for all of you missionary listeners, we believe that God is going to do a new thing in you. This is going to be the start of something new. So bring it to God, because you might be angry with him. He's not angry with you. He loves you, and he can take however big of emotions you've got. He's got you. He's got you. So
Yeah.
thank you again, Erik, so much for joining us.